trying very hard to talk him out of it, but he is relentless. I really hope he comes to his senses. So anyway, I am sitting here at my kitchen table, watching the wind blow and the snow fall. Really enjoying this view. And I am so glad that you guys are here with me. I wish you can see how beautiful it is because the camera just doesn't do it justice to what it really looks like in person. The snow is falling much harder than it appears. The camera's just not picking up all the little flakes. You probably can hear the wind, however, because it is extremely windy. And you can hear it from inside the house. The howling. So I thought today we can do something really comforting and relaxing. So I downloaded and printed the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Even though it is a child's book, I thought, why not read it to you guys anyway? So we can hang out, watch the snow, go back to our childhood, listen to a good story, and maybe even fall asleep or take a nap or just completely relax and get some tingles, whatever it is that you're looking to do. I figured that reading Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs would be very fitting on a day like today. So since we have the mood already set for us, let's get into the story. It was the middle of winter and the snowflakes were falling like feathers from the sky. And a queen sat at her window, working, and her embroidery fame was of ebony. And she worked, gazing at times out on the snow. She pricked her finger, and there fell from it drops of blood on the snow. And when she saw how bright and red it looked, she said to herself, "Oh, that I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, as black as the wood of the embroidery frame." Not very long after, she had a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips red as blood, and her hair as black as the ebony, and she was named Snow White. And when she was born, the queen died. After a year had gone by, the king took another wife, a beautiful woman, but proud and overbearing. She could not bear to be surpassed in beauty by anyone. She had a magic looking glass, and she used to stand before it and look in it and say, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And the looking glass would answer, "You are the fairest of them all." And she was contented, for she knew that the looking glass spoke the truth. Now Snow White was growing prettier and prettier, and when she was 7 years old, she was as beautiful as day. Far more beautiful than the queen herself. So one day, when the queen went to her mirror and said, she stayed and kept the house in good order. In the morning the dwarfs went to the mountain to dig for gold, and in the evening they came home, and their supper had to be ready for them. All day long the maiden was left alone, and the good little dwarfs warned her by saying, "Beware of your stepmother. She will soon know you are here. Let no one into the house." Now the queen, having eaten Snow White's heart, as she supposed, felt quite sure of that now she was the first and fairest, and so she came to her mirror and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is the Snow White longed for the beautiful apple, and as she saw the peasant woman eating a piece of it, she could no longer refrain, but stretched out her hand into her mouth, and then she fell to the earth as dead. And the queen, casting on her terrible glance, laughed aloud and cried, "As white as snow, as red as blood, as black as ebony, this time the dwarfs will not be able to bring you to life again." And when she went home and asked the looking glass against the wall, "Who is the fairest of us all?" And at last it answered, "You are the fairest now of all." Then her envious heart had peace, as much as an envious heart can have. The dwarfs, when they came home in the evening, found Snow White lying on the ground, and there came no breath out of her mouth, and she was dead. They lifted her up and thought if anything poisonous was to be found, cut her laces, combed her hair, washed her with water and wine, but all was of no avail. The poor child was dead and remained dead. Then they had laid her on a bier and sat all 7 of them round it and wept and lamented 3 whole days, and then they would have buried her, but she looked still as if she were living, with her beautiful blooming cheeks. So they said, "We cannot hide her away in the black ground." And they had made a coffin of clear glass, so as to be looked into from all sides, and they laid her in it, and wrote in golden letters upon it her name, and that she was a king's daughter. Then they set the coffin out upon the mountains, and one of them always remained by it to watch. And the birds came too and mourned for Snow White, first an owl, then a raven, and lastly a dove. Now for a long while Snow White lay in the coffin and never changed, but looked as if she were asleep, for she was still as white as snow, as red as blood, and her hair was as black as ebony. It happened, however, that one day a king's son rode through the wood and up to the dwarf's house, which was near it. He saw on the mountain a coffin and beautiful Snow White within it, and he read what was written in golden letters upon it. Then he said to the dwarfs, "Let me have the coffin, and I will give you whatever you would like for it." But the dwarfs told him that they could not part with it for all the gold in the world. But he said, "I beseech you to give it to me, for I cannot live without looking upon Snow White. If you consent, I will bring you great honor and care for you as if you were my brethren." When he spoke, the little dwarfs had pity upon him and gave him the coffin, and the king's son called his servants and bid them carry it away on their shoulders. Now it had happened that they were going along as they stumbled over a bush, and with all the shaking, the bit of poison apple flew out of her throat. It was not long before she opened her eyes, threw up the cover of the coffin, and sat up, alive and well. "Oh dear, where am I?" cried she. The king's son answered, full of joy, "You are near me." And relating all that had happened, he said, "I would rather have you than anything in the world. Come with me to my father's castle, and you shall be my bride." And Snow White was kind and went with him, and their wedding was held with pomp and great splendor. But Snow White's wicked stepmother was also bidden to the feast, and when she had dressed herself in beautiful clothes and went to the looking glass and said, "Looking glass upon the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" She were